Is Roleplay Adventures a game for you? Come on back after the break. Hey everybody, welcome to the show Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is part of a video series looking at the game of Role Player Adventures from Thunderworks Games. Now, Role Player Adventures is a 1 to 4 player cooperative story-based game. This is a game where players will be playing a cooperative journey. Matter of fact, if you're familiar with games such as Time Stories, if you're looking at games such as Agents of Smersh, if you played games that are full story-based games, even Tales of the Arabian Nights, you have a rough idea of what's going on here. What's more unique to the game of Role Player Adventures, though, is that this is a fully cooperative game in a fantasy realm that actually has more of a board game involved in it than a standard storytelling game. Whereas opposed to games such as Time Stories is just a grand puzzle where players are trying to work together as a puzzle on a time-sensitive thing where they're looking for clues. It's more like a whodunit type of game. Or you have Tales of the Arabian Nights where it's kind of like, well, let's just call it a little bit of chaos. Then you have games such as Agents of Smersh, which tries to have a little bit more of a board game involvement, but it's still a really strong story-based game. It's a little bit more of a random story-based game. This game itself is more of a campaign-based system. In this game, players are going to create a hero or pick a random hero from one of the pre-generated heroes, and we're going to make a party, and we're going to use this party that we're going to level up. It's going to feel a lot more closer to a traditional Dungeons & Dragons or RPG-style game, where we're going to create a party of heroes. Our party of heroes is going to experience this campaign through many, many adventures. Our decisions are going to matter. Our decisions are going to evolve through various different decision trees, which are going to cause a storyline to continue, and we're going to reach the end of the storyline, and we're going to have this grand story, this grand adventure that we're going to go on. One of the really interesting things about the game, just talking about what the design of itself is versus the actual mechanics, is this game does have a full leveling system to it. Players are going to be playing a dice manipulation game through the use of dice and also through cards, but cards have a very strong thematic feel because this is a strong fantasy world that's been created by the designers, and players are going to be playing cards that create a very strong fantasy theme. You have a lot of cards that, instead of just saying flip a blue die over, you have a card such as Tower Shield, you have a card such as Exile, you have Tremor, you have Obnoxious, Chain Gorget, Blessed Mace, all these different things that are going to allow you to do dice manipulation, again adding to the theme of the game to try to create a more of a story-based game. And I guess before we go any further in this review, I should say that I 100% suggest that anybody's looking into the game, get the expansion. The expansion is going to tell you a whole bunch of backstories for all the characters, and every single backstory is unique to every single one of the characters involved. This character right here, he has his own special backstory that you're only going to be able to access if you have the actual expansion. And this goes for all the pre-generated characters. Not only does this add a little bit more agency to each individual player playing at the table because they want to solve their own storyline, adding this expansion is also going to add a lot more to the replay variety of the game because there's well over 30 of these different backgrounds, and every one of these backgrounds is actually married to the original story for the game. Yes, the game does stand on its own, and you don't need these backgrounds to experience those stories, but these stories are especially locked in with the story, and there's things that occur in the story only if you have the right background. So that does add a lot to the replay and a lot to the variety. And I'm definitely, before I go anywhere, going to say that if you are going to get into role player, pick up that expansion. It's going to make a huge difference, and you're really going to appreciate your long-term enjoyment of this game. Now, the basic idea of Role Player Adventures is, again, this is, ignore the story part of it. Mechanically, what this is this is a dice manipulation game. The basic idea of the game is through various different events and choices, we're going to get dice, and we're going to use these dice to accomplish tasks. Now, the tasks are, we're going to be assigning these dice to defeat monsters. We're going to assign these dice to accomplish skill tests. And we're going to be using these dice, and we're going to manipulate them, again, through our card play to try to proceed through a story. Now, the interesting thing about the story here is failure and success may be something you want to seek as success, but the story does allow you to fail. Failing isn't the end of the campaign. It's just a different path in the storyline, which is very nice. So you don't have to feel the pressure of the dice, and it's probably a good thing because I'll talk about this in a little bit, but the challenge of the game is really in the earlier stages. As you play later on through the game, you're going to notice the game does get simpler, the dice manipulation does get simpler, and it becomes much more focused on the storyline and your choices that you're going to make, and a lot less about the dice manipulation. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not going to be a pushover, but you will notice that the challenge level in the early stages versus the challenge level once you got a good set of cards, a good set of abilities, a good set of level ups, you're going to notice that you're starting to tear through things a little bit better. It is nice, though, that the challenge does continue to ramp up. The enemies you're going to fight are going to be stronger, and you're going to get modifier cards, which will make them stronger. So the early levels, you may fight a basic enemy, and I'm trying to minimize spoilers, so I'm not going to flip over too many cards here. But as you're going to play the game, you're going to start adding these modifiers. These modifiers are going to start making the encounters much more challenging. So that's good. It's a good way to start increasing the challenge, so it's not going to be a pushover as you go through it. Again, also with the skills, you're going to see that the early skill challenges are going to be a little bit easier, and they're going to start evolving, becoming much more challenging. But the way your characters evolve is going to outpace the challenge level of the game. Not in a terrible way. Just understand that as you're playing the game, it is going to get a little bit simpler. Not terribly, but you're definitely going to see that sliding scale. Now, the game itself is going to appeal to more of your story-based players. This is definitely not a game you're buying purely for the mechanics. Now, there's nothing wrong with the mechanics, like I've said many times. This is definitely a game that you are buying for the story, and this is a game that has a really huge story. There's multiple different storybooks for the game. Again, not going to go into spoilers here, but you can see just how thick this book is right here. And this is just the randomizer for all the adventures. Every single adventure has a whole bunch of randomizers based on these tokens, which is going to increase the replay variety of the game, meaning that you're going to want to play this game at least twice. There's also two, well, technically three. There's three different factions in the game, but two really strong opposing factions. And your encounters and your decisions are going to influence your amount of faction with these different groups of people. Again, trying to avoid spoilers here. You're basically going to build up your fame with these different factions, and your level of fame with these different factions is going to judge which paths on the storyline you're going to get. But this is the randomizer stories that you're probably not, well, you're definitely not going to see all of these on every single playthrough of the game. So this is not enough random variety to make you want to go back and play the game. Additionally, on top of that, you're going to see that there are a large amount of storybooks in this game. This game comes with all these different storybooks, and every single one of these storybooks is going to be a separate adventure. Now, the early adventures are going to play a little bit quicker, and the later adventures are going to start taking a lot more time. And of course, there's the side quest right here, which I'm not going to talk about because I don't want to ruin any surprises. But the basic idea is you're going to play through all these adventures in order until you get to the finale there, which is going to be judged by whatever decisions you made as you played through the storyline. Now, the players I think who are going to enjoy this game the most are your story-based gamers, the ones who feel like they want to play more of a Dungeons & Dragons style game, but they either don't want to get the people together to play an RPG, or they want the less of the requirements, the less of the restrictions, the less of the things that are required to play a true RPG. I mean, we all know that playing a true RPG is an investment of time, it's an investment of getting people together. Basically, your true RPGs are going to last for months and months, sometimes even years. Many of us have had RPG campaigns that lasted for 2 or even 3 years, and that's one heck of an investment that some people don't want to do. And the nice thing about games like this is not only do they allow you to get the feel of an RPG, they also allow you to get the feel of an RPG in smaller sessions. They allow you to get the feel of an RPG in less of a long campaign feeling, but they're also going to let you get the feeling of an RPG with less players. The wonderful thing about these style of games is that these games, especially when we're looking at role-player adventures itself, it plays pretty darn well all the way from 1 to 4 players. I can sit here, and if I don't have any friends to get together with RPGs because somebody's sick, somebody has a kid, somebody has cooked dinner, somebody's out of town, somebody has to work extra shifts at work, somebody has a special project at work that's due, whatever it happens to be, I don't need to fall or be victim to those kind of things happening. I can pull out a game like this and play it all by myself and enjoy a great story-based adventure. And I think that those are the people who are really going to get the most enjoyment out of this game. I don't think people who are looking for a very deep strategic dice manipulation game with very strong card play are the people who are going to get the most enjoyment out of this game, because as you're going to play on through the game, you're going to start seeing it's less about these mechanics and much more about the story and your decisions that you're making as you're playing the story. This isn't Alien Frontiers, a really thinky, brainy game where you're trying to do specific, perfect dice manipulation. This is a game that's all about the story and the enjoyment, and it just happens to have some nice mechanics melded in with the game to kind of make it less of a way overpriced choose your adventure storybook and much more about an actual game that does play really well for 1 to 4 players. Now, the player count on this game is pretty good on all these player counts. I mean, you're going to feel differences between these player counts. A solo player is definitely going to feel like the game is going to start off much more challenging because you're going to be kind of railroaded in the beginning, especially you're just looking at this basic starting character right here. You see I have 0 dex, I have 0 intelligence, and my main thing is basically wisdom, strength, and constitution. If I run into encounters that require me to have dex and intelligence, I'm probably going to fail those a lot. If I have encounters in the early beginning that require me to do wisdom, probably going to have a good chance of succeeding. All alone, I'm kind of pigeonholed, but as I start adding more players to the game, the more players and more characters are going to start giving you more options and more abilities to interact with the full story itself, meaning it's going to play a little bit better with more heroes. But at the other end of the spectrum, once you get to 4 players, the game has a strong feel of people are going to feel like they don't have anything to do. Basically, you have one player who's going to be in charge of reading from the adventure story. You have one person who's going to be in charge of reading from the Tome of Encounters. Then you have one person who's going to be in charge of rolling the dice. And then the 4th person, whoever it happens to be, it just feels like they're going to be like, guys, I might have a card that's going to work here, or I might have a card that's going to work here. Sure, you're not going to be totally uninvolved in the game, but you're not going to have the feeling of the full involvement that you're going to get at a 2 or 3 player count. And I really think that this game is going to play best as a 2-player game just because of what I've said. 1 player feels like it starts off a little bit too pigeonholed and a little bit overly challenging, but then it kind of really does that snowball effect and starts getting easier towards the end game. 4-player is good, but then you're going to start having players feeling like they're being left out, and in the game also just kind of starts easy and just kind of stays easy for most of the game. Whereas opposed to a 2-player game, if you get 2 heroes who kind of complement each other, you feel like you can go out there and make decisions, and 2 players can really interact with the game a lot better. And heck, let's not just lie, our miniature only shows 2 heroes on it anyway, so that's probably for a good reason. Maybe it's just because the game does play best as a 2 or 3-player game. And I would actually say this is a fantastic game for couples, especially couples who want to play an RPG-style game. A storytelling game with at least 2 playthroughs through it, thanks to the fact that the game does have the different factions that you're going to try to curry favor with. You can literally play the game 1 time through, curry the favor of one of the factions, start the game all over and try to curry the other faction, pretty much have a different story and a different experience. And again, not even throwing the factor that every one of these pre-generated characters has their own backstory, and that backstory is going to evolve and be involved with the story differently. So you can literally just pick completely different heroes, play the game again, and probably get a little bit different of a story. Now, one of the big negatives I do have with the game, and again, I'm not trying to be overly harping on things, is there's a couple negatives that are going to be with the game. One of the biggest negatives with the game is this is a dice manipulation game, and it feels like the dice manipulation mechanics and the card-based mechanics are basically trying to interact with a story game. This game feels like it's story first, mechanics second. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing for a story-based game. But don't get this game expecting role player, the game that this is basically a spiritual successor for. Matter of fact, it's such a spiritual successor for that you can actually get the role player game, play through a whole role player game with your friends for playing about 1.5 to 2.5 hours, depending on how you guys play your games. And then you can take your characters that you actually created in that game and import them into this game. Now, I highly suggest you don't do that the first time you play through the game, because most of those characters you're going to import are going to be more powerful than these standard characters. Again, it's going to make the game feel much more easier when you're playing the game, but it is kind of a cool thing that you can have there. But again, just want to emphasize here, this game is not a true dice manipulation game like the standard role player. Role player adventures is very much about the story first. Secondary is about the mechanics. Now, it does have some nice throwbacks from the role player game that are very, very nice. Obviously, we have the dice manipulation. We have the colors of the dice. We have the statistics we've seen. And matter of fact, we have all these cards that are pretty much right from role player. And they do a good way of making the game feel like we're getting the theme of a fantasy game, but also makes us feel like we're in the world of the role player games. And it's a very nice touch. We get all this extra stuff added into the game. And I really do appreciate that. But I'm not going to lie here, though. The game does not really offer a deep mechanical challenge. Get this game if you're looking for a really good story-based game that plays with a lower player count. Don't get this game because you're looking for the next sequel for Role Player, another deep dice manipulation, strategy game, tactical game where players are using resources to come out on top. That's definitely not what this game is for. If you're looking for that in a game, you're going to be disappointed. If you're looking for a game that's going to tell you a really good, intriguing story that you're going to enjoy playing through, this is definitely the game you're going to enjoy. But talking about playing through this game, we do come with the other major negative for this game. This is not a cheap game. This is a game that is well over $100. Matter of fact, if I didn't back this Kickstarter, this is actually a friend's copy of the game right here. But I do believe the Kickstarter alone was $140, which was the base game plus the expansion. And again, I highly do recommend you get that expansion. So you're looking at $140 for a game that's probably going to give you less than 20 hours of playtime. And that's going through the entire campaign one time. So the bonus here is there is a side quest. No spoilers, but that's going to add a little bit of playtime to the game. Plus, there's basically 2 really strong opposing factions in the game that's going to give you another incentive to play through this game a second time. So for the $140, you're probably looking at about a total of 40 hours of playtime out of this game, but that's going to be about it. conservatively, if you really, really are this kind of person who could do this, you could play through this game one time, put it back on the shelf for about 5 or 6 months, enough time to forget some of the main story focuses, pull it back out, play it again, and try to mentally focus on going towards one of the other factions, going towards the other favors. Put the game back on the shelf for another 5 months, pull it back off the shelf, pick some different heroes, and go through it again. Then you might be able to get some extra play value out of it, but right out of the box, for most of your average players, you're going to get about 20 to 25 hours of playtime from this game. Then you're going to pack it up, you're going to turn around and sell it. Now, whether that's a positive or negative, that's going to be up to you. I know me personally, when it comes to buying my games, this is a very expensive hobby. And when you're spending $100, $150, or close to $200 on a game, 20 hours of gameplay, that may be okay for you. But for me, I can sit back and think that I have great games such as Azul, which is a $30 game, where I think I've probably played that game like 40 or more times, which means I have a $30 game that I've gotten well over 80 plus hours of gameplay enjoyment out of. That's a game I plan on keep on playing. I mean, you can basically balance that and see how that is going to work for you. Is that going to give you a lot of heartburn thinking about you're spending a lot of money for little play value? Or are you okay with that? Or are you going to split the cost up among your group? Or are you planning on selling the game at a later date and getting about half your money back? That's not something that bothers you or something you're okay with, then you're probably not going to mind the extra money investment for what is really comes down to a really overly fancy choose your own adventure book with lots of books thrown into one base box. Now, it's very easy to see that this was definitely a work that was from the heart from the designer. There was a lot of extra things that were put in this game to ensure that you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of this game. There are multiple maps, and these are pretty good quality. This is not paper maps. This is that slightly plastic coated map, so these are going to last for multiple uses. All these maps are double-sided. You have all these cards, and these cards are going to modify your maps on some of the maps to add to the variety, minimize the surprises, or I'm sorry, maximize the surprises while minimizing the spoilers, and help you have an adventure that feels like is evolving for you. So there was a lot of positive decisions that went into going to make this game. Make sure that this feels like a story that evolves with you as you play, and also makes it feel like a story that you are experiencing as a story you're enjoying. Now, the writing is pretty good. It's not the best writing in the world, but it's actually pretty darn good for a board game. Actually, for a board game, I'd actually say it's really, really good. If I went and bought this off the shelf as a book, I would probably call this like maybe a $6 book. You know, those books you can get off of Kindle and stuff like that. The cheaper books, but for a board game, the story is actually really darn good. I feel like it's evolving, a lot of tropes we've seen before, but it's a pretty cool story with lots of cool decisions, and there's different decision trees that I really enjoy. And I really did feel like the decisions I made were impactful. I felt like as I was going through the story, there was many times I would actually pause and go, I could free this guy, or I can put this guy in jail. Or I could leave this guy here to rot, or I can go out here and rescue this person. And I knew my decisions would matter. And I had to basically take what I felt like from a role-playing standpoint. What did I feel like my party was doing? Did I feel like I was the heroes, or was I more like the dark hero, or was I the anti-hero? And I kind of felt like I was incorporating that into my play, and that was a really good thing. I really did enjoy that. Matter of fact, if you just took this game took it as a category of story-based games, if I was to take this game and put it up against games such as Time Stories, games such as Tales of Arabian Nights, Agents of Smirch, and all these different story-based games that I can ramble off, I'd probably say this game is better than all those games. All those games had negatives that made them not as good. They're either broken stories, or they're not very replayable, or they're more of a puzzly story than anything else. So as a pure story standpoint, I would say this game is actually really, really good. If you would just take this game from its mechanics standpoint, though, you're probably going to say that's where the big negative comes in. The challenge level doesn't stay consistent, and the dice mechanics get much more easy to manipulate, and you're going to get to the point where it's going to feel like you're really less playing the game and more enjoying the story. It's not really a negative, but again, it's not really a positive. It depends on what you're really looking to get out of this game. Now, I do have to say the components that come with this game are absolutely fantastic. It's a wonderful thing that the book of adventures that is going to be used most, and I'm not going to flip through this too much here, but this book of adventures that's going to see a lot of wear and tear right here, because this one's going to be accessed for every single adventure. It's spiral bound. That's awesome. That means this book is going to last a long time. The paperwork, the quality is really, really good. These little mini adventures right here, they are really great. Matter of fact, you know what they remind me of? These remind me of the classic Dungeons & Dragons adventures from the 80s, where they were the thinner modules where you pull out these modules. That was a wonderful throwback. Matter of fact, if you ever played 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, you know exactly what I'm talking about with those classic adventures like the Temple of Tamalakan and the, gosh, I'm just drawing a blank because there's so many great adventures. Area of the Slave Lords, Queen of the Demon Pits, all those great classic second edition modules, they all look like this. It's a wonderful throwback, and I love the homage they did there. So that's really, really good. The dice are really good quality. They're full-size dice, not those chintzy little dice that you get in some games. The cards are great. They all have some great artwork on them. Looking at all the heroes, they all have fantastic artwork on them. They did a really good job here. There's a lot of wonderful things to say about the components. They obviously knew where they had to put their effort, they knew where they put their work, and they knew where they had to put their time to make this game appear and be more appealing to the consumer. Because if you take away a lot of these things, it's much easier to look at the negatives of this game. But since they put the extra effort in here, it kind of puts the negatives of the game off to the side, makes it much easier to concentrate on all the positives that come with this game. The huge amount of variety, the wonderful look of the game, the feel of actually going through a sprawling campaign, and the wonderful ability to play a campaign-based game from 1 to 4 players, and again, it's going to feel best as a 2-player game. Now, I know I've been a little bit negative on the mechanics for the game, and I've probably been overly, hyperly critical of the mechanics of the game for the simple fact that I just want people to understand that it's not the main focus. But I do want to say I do appreciate the actual mechanics for the game and how the mechanics were married in with the actual components of the game to make it feel like you actually do have agency in the game. Now, the storyline, for the most part, is written in a way that failure is not a terrible thing. Matter of fact, you can fail multiple times and still continue on with the story and not feel like you need to start all over again. Hello, Time Stories. This is how you make a real game. Don't force us to start over from the beginning every damn time. It's a horrible mechanic. Sorry for the tangent. But it's really wonderful how they make it feel like failure is something you want to avoid, but failure is not the end of the world. I like that. That is a positive. I also like the fact that how we're using our statistics to go ahead and manipulate the dice as they're coming out is also really cool. It makes me feel like I need to make decisions. Now, again, going back to the easierness of the mechanics, that's not really a word. I just made it up right here. Call Webster's and get me in trouble. But talking about the ease of the mechanics itself, the game is going to give you lots of ways to catch up. There's a rest mechanic basically after every skill and basically after every combat, for the most part. Don't want to do spoilers here, but for the most part, you can do a rest action. It's not a big deal, so it never really feels like you're in great danger. And to be fair, to minimize spoilers, if you build up your campaign in one certain way, it's easy. If you build up your campaign in another way, it's really challenging. Not doing spoilers. Plus, on top of that, if you really want to make the game much more challenging, and I'd probably highly recommend doing this for a lot of the more gamer people out there, if you want the game to be a little more challenging, play the game on legendary difficulty. Now, doing my tutorial, I do not cover legendary because I don't want people to start off with legendary, because the first module actually kind of feels like it's right where the challenge level should be. But the legendary difficulty does make the game feel like where it should be for more of your gamers. And I think more of your gamers are going to enjoy playing at the legendary difficulty because it's going to feel a lot better for them. I don't know, that's a bad choice of words, but they're going to feel like that they're actually getting a challenge all the time. But I want to say that when you play on the legendary difficulty level, understand that you are going to be at the whims of these dice, because these dice are going to hate you sometimes. Luckily, failure is not that bad, but on legendary difficulty, failure is worse. So make sure you understand that playing legendary does probably put the game where you want it more on the difficulty chain. So my bottom line here is, did I enjoy role-play adventures? For the story, yes, 100%. I really enjoyed the story. As I was playing through the story, I constantly wanted to go to the next adventure and constantly went to the next adventure. Now, I guess I should preface it right here is that I have not completed the adventure yet. I stopped at a certain point because, like I said, this is a friend's copy of the game, and I want to play this game with my friends. I've been mainly going through this solo, 2 and 3 players, but my friend who actually owns the game, I want to play with him and that gaming group that I have. So I haven't finished the game for that aspect, so there may be some surprises I don't know about. But so far, everything about the story makes me feel like I want to keep going. I like the storyline, I like the choices, I like the decisions, and I like the feeling that every time I make a decision, it matters. I love how it pulled me into the storyline, made me say, make a choice, and you're going to be stuck with a choice. Thanks to the fact that we have the titles. I almost pulled up a title card, but I don't want to do any spoilers. But the titles are going to carry forward. They're going to affect the long, ongoing story. The exploration of the story is going to be really good. And I also like the fact that you can level up your character. Kind of makes you feel like your character is yours. And again, kind of gives you more of the RPG feel. And I really did appreciate that. I thought that was great. I would love to see more expansions. I would love to see more with this game world. I think there's a lot of potential for this game world to continue on. And I really do enjoy what they did here. And I want to see more expansions and more content. Again, I highly think that you want to. It's almost like a mandatory purchase to get the background stories for the basic game. But I'd love to see them carry on the storylines, carry on the adventures, and bring out more expansions. From what they have right here, it probably wouldn't be that hard to do so, because at this point, they can recycle the enemies. They can probably, well, okay, let's break this down. We can bring out some expansions with some more adventure books. We probably just need to add a couple enemy cards, add a couple titles, and we can probably just bring out some new mats, and then we can just save all the stuff we have here, and they can probably keep running the store with new adventures, new campaigns, and new fun things. And I'd really highly like to do that. If you get past the fact that the difficulty level is not that hard unless you play on Legendary, if you get past the fact that this is not a true dice manipulation game, it's much more about the storyline game. And if you get past the fact that, you know, this is a game that only has limited amount of replayability, you're looking at a wonderful purchase. If any of those things I mentioned are going to cause you a little heartburn, think twice before picking up the game. But even saying that, if you enjoy story-based games, I would say look into this game, because as story-based games go, this game is really high up there. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I will definitely answer them as quickly as I can. Also, feel free to email me at off-the-shelf-board-game-reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. Be sure to do my best to answer emails as quickly as I can. If you enjoy this video channel and the content I put out there, think about tossing $1 in the tip jar over at Patreon. Patreon.com/OTSBGR. This channel is 100% sponsor free, and I don't have the luxury of free games. Basically, when you see content put out there, it's basically from myself and from my friends in my gaming group, because we're buying these games. We're customers just like you. Think about tossing $1 in the tip jar to help me cover my costs, help keep the channel growing strong. If you enjoy this video series, click that like button, click that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching.